Hey, Joni here. In today's video we will talk about the only way to end the war Russia started in Ukraine. Russia's illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine has lasted for almost 3 years already. This invasion has been a massive failure for Russia so far. Russia currently occupies less than 20% of Ukrainian territory, while it used to occupy around 30% in March 2022. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine controlled 23 capital and special status cities. After almost 3 years, it still controls all of them. 0 out of 23 is a huge failure for Russia, especially when considering the resources Russia has used to reach that score of 0 out of 23. Russia has had over 700,000 total casualties in this war. Russia has needed to mobilize, recruit heavily, but also use prisoners and foreign mercenaries. And yet Russia is further away from reaching its initial strategic goals than what it was in March 2022. However, despite this massive failure by Russia, the war keeps on going. And Ukrainians are the ones suffering from it, while Russia has no motivation to end it. There is a lot of propaganda on this, but the reality is that Ukraine wants peace much more than Russia does. Ukrainians are the ones that pay the highest price for this war that they did not choose. I've met many Ukrainian soldiers and civilians during the war, and I can tell you that none of them want this war, but they have no choice. Ukraine as a country wants the war to be over, but it needs a just peace. Ukraine cannot just give up its territories like that, especially after being attacked unfairly. And once peace happens, it needs to be a lasting peace. And all this talk is useless for now anyway, because Russia does not want peace. The only peace that Russia would accept for now is a Ukrainian surrender, and a Ukrainian surrender is not peace. As Anders Nielsen said in his latest video, neither side is close enough to losing to be ready to accept large concessions for now. And once negotiations start, they might last for a very long time, even years. So what can be done to make this war end? Since the beginning of the full-scale war, there's been a lot of talk about ending the war, but very few solutions. And there is no magical way to end the war, but there are ways to accelerate this process. And the main way is to make Putin and Russia change their perception of the future of this war. Currently, Putin is convinced that the situation for Russia will improve in the future, at least on a military level. Putin and Russians are convinced that they will outlast the West, and that Western support will decrease over time, which will open the way for Russia to advance more on the front, and thus give Russia more leverage and improve its situation for future negotiations. And it's actually not surprising that they believe that. After all, a big part of Trump's campaign was based on promising to stop aid and to stop the war in Ukraine. And many of Trump's transition team members and people around him still repeat that. And some of them, including his son Don Jr., make fun of Ukraine and openly laugh about cutting aid to Ukraine soon. These people are not professionals, and it's normal under these circumstances that Russia doesn't take the US seriously, and that they are convinced that the US won't help Ukraine in the long run. At the same time, while the US is ruining its leverage on Russia, the EU is waiting and seeing what happens, which is stupid and dangerous. So to sum it up, Russia is not ready for concessions, mostly because they are convinced that their situation on the front will improve and that will give them more leverage for negotiations in the future. And at the same time, the US and EU are not making their best to make Putin and Russia change their perceptions on this. Russia changing its perception is the only way to end the war. How can we do that? To make Putin and Russians understand that the situation will get worse for them in the future, we need long-term commitments of aid to Ukraine. This should be a no-brainer, really. Ukraine will need our military aid no matter what. Even if a peace treaty would be signed next week, Ukraine would still need our military aid in the future. And because of that, the US and EU need to continue military aid to Ukraine during negotiations, but also to make long-term commitments that don't depend on the negotiations. This needs to be done to avoid Russia thinking that it can outlast the West. And all of this needs to be combined with tougher sanctions, and also threats. We need to make it clear that there will be consequences if Russia does not stop its war in Ukraine. This could mean many things. It could be the threat of a large package of military aid, or of some sanctions that would really hurt Russia, or to remove some restrictions that we have set on Ukraine, or us sending troops on the ground in Western Ukraine to train Ukrainians. There are many options on what we can do. None of these options are perfect, and all of them are complicated on a political level. But as I said, the only way to end the war is to change Putin's and Russia's perception of the future of this war, to make them understand that the future will be worse for Russia if it continues. And to do that, we need to give Ukraine more leverage and make sure that Russia doesn't think that it can outlast us. And that requires long-term commitments. Nothing else will make Putin understand that he won't outlast us. What are your thoughts on it? What would be the best way to make Putin understand that he won't outlast us according to you? Write your ideas in the comments. Thank you. Well, this was it for today's video. I hope that you liked it. If you did, please like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.